as we continue Teacher Appreciation Week, we're still looking at teachers that we don't appreciate. We don't appreciate teachers breaking the rules, breaking the law. In this case right here, here's a question for you. What would you do if your school had a law saying you cannot disclose gender preferences from parents? If your your school says hide students' gender preferences and you refuse to do so, that's exactly what happened. This teacher is now speaking out in California. In California, about almost 2 months ago, a teacher was fired for not hiding the preferences. So what in the world is going on? Well, it's all according to a state law. You're about to meet the teacher and hear her side of the story as she explains what happened. Take a look.
Jessica Tapia was fired as a teacher from Jurupa Valley High School for refusing to hide students' gender preferences from parents.
And I said, "Are you asking me to lie to parents?" And they said, "Yes."
AB 1266 passed in 2014. Schools can't tell parents about their children's gender identity without first asking the student. Assemblyman Billy Saley is introducing legislation saying he wants to protect parental rights so parents know what is going on with their children.
Concealing information from parents is not only wrong, it's dangerous and harmful to the emotional and physical safety of trans minors.
Tapia says parents need to be involved during this time.
We are talking about minors. Their brain is not fully developed. The decision-making portal in that brain it's not fully developed, and they need their parents at this time for everything they're going through, mentally, emotionally, physically, spiritually, you name it.
The Jurupa Unified School District sent a statement saying, in part, all students and staff enjoy the right to privacy under the constitutions of the United States and California. While individuals may elect to disclose their personal information to the public, the district is prohibited from doing so. The district's actions related to Ms. Tapia were based on its obligations under current state and federal law, which protects student privacy and requires the district to provide a discrimination-free learning environment to students.
The law will reset the appropriate relationship between educators and parents and reaffirm that children are the domain of their parents, not the government.
Some parents at the school think they need to know what their minor children are doing.
Parents should absolutely be involved in all the decisions that their kids make. Right now, kids are influenced by the media, by their friends, by just a lot of mixed messages.
Tapia is planning to sue the school district for wrongful termination.
Hello, I'm Mark Brown. Get more great...
Common sense alert. Common sense alert. I'm jumping in there. By the way, before we move on, if you're hearing a fan in the background back there, that's because water was coming in from the bathroom and flooded the other room. So I do apologize in advance. Okay. Common sense needs to tell you, if the school tells you to lie, you need to resign, move to a different state where you can educate kids. They tell you to lie, okay. Do not lie. It's like the old saying, the mouth can lie but the brain can't. And the question, are you forcing me to lie? And the school said yes. So we've heard her side, and we heard the school side saying their part in their statement. So what does that tell you? That tells you that the employee was in the right. So where does this fall on the appreciation and unappreciated chart? That's going to fall in the appreciation chart because I think she did the right thing. But she also violated the law. But they're changing the law. So you may be asking me, well, where does this go? This goes on the appreciation chart. Because of what she did. She's filing a lawsuit for wrongful termination, I think she may have a case. You were asking if an attorney came over here. And they were to see what, and I would ask them about this, then all of a sudden, okay, so I'm really glad the teacher has a case and wrongful termination. So depending on which side you pick, the laws change, and I think she did the right thing. So that really tells you that so for today, she's on the appreciation side, along with others. So here's what's going to happen. A bit later on, I'm going to play you. We're going back to our teacher. Appreciate teachers a bit later. About a teacher who was fired over anti-Asian rant that was captured on video. You'll see that video and you'll hear what happened. But coming up next, we're going to hear more from Ben Kolb's family and the hospital. The hospital tells the parents that about the investigation. How will they react? John Hockenberry continues a lesson from Ben. Stay with us. On our last episode, I brought you the story of young Ben Kolb, who died by a medical mistake, which was caused by the hospital. We've heard all sides of the story from one parent, heard the other side from the doctor who administered the sleeping thing. You know, the anesthesia. You know, the anesthesia thing. But what happened next was sudden everywhere. We've heard from all sides. We heard from the investigation. Now, what's going to happen when the hospital tells the parents the damning truth? How will the parents react? Again, John Hockenberry.
I knew there had to be an answer somewhere. Whether they had it at that point or not, I didn't know, but I knew if somebody made the effort, we could find the answer.
Who's this from?
Santa!
Tim Kolb wanted to know what had happened to his son. Why had Ben died following routine ear surgery? After its investigation, Martin Memorial Hospital knew what had gone wrong and why. But the hospital was at a critical juncture.
The damage had already been done. The child was dead. Okay, so you have two choices. You can lie, you can cover up, you can spin it, or you can be honest. And the nice thing about the truth is you basically only have to tell it once.
Surprisingly, the hospital chose to go public with the results of their investigation.
But that was also an opportunity, it seems to me, for an institution like this and for you to say, look, we circle the wagons, we put up the walls, we issue a no comment. Basically, our next step is dealing with, a multi-million-dollar lawsuit. Why didn't you do that?
That wasn't the right thing to do.
In whose eyes?
In any of our eyes. Martin Memorial is very committed to ethical medicine.
Together, Dr. McLean and Donnie Haas drove to a meeting with the Kolbs at their lawyer's office, prepared to announce something almost unheard of, that Martin Memorial Hospital was responsible for their son's death. It was both a financial and an emotional gamble.
It was real personal. I have a grandson that age.
And 6 children of your own?
And 6 of my own, right? I could really relate to this.
You look in a parent's eyes that, their child is dead because of a mistake, and that, it's, how about you take my baby away? Because, this is a very beautiful, healthy child that should not have died.
What was the first thing in reaction that the Kolbs said to you? Do you remember?
I don't think they could speak, really. I don't recall them saying anything. I remember a huge tear on Mrs. Kolb's cheek.
And I was I was in shock. I was in just an utter shock that such a simple mistake, number one, could occur in an operating room, and number two, that it could so easily take a life.
As painful as it was to hear, the facts about Ben's death were what the Kolbs wanted, even more than a multi-million-dollar settlement.
Revenge wasn't there for me.
So on the list of things you wanted from them, it wasn't money at the top.
Oh, absolutely.
It wasn't people being fired at the top.
No.
It was just an answer.
Oh yeah, we wanted to know what happened. We wanted the truth.
In fact, after hearing the hospital's admission about how Ben had died and why, and what had been done to fix its system, the Kolbs made an equally remarkable decision not to file a lawsuit.
You hear the stories how it could drag on and on and on for years, and you don't get closure for a very long time in a situation like that, and I didn't want to have to go through that procedure.
A confidential settlement was reached that evening.
You were, in a sense, betting the farm, betting uncountable liability for this institution, that the Kolbs were going to look at your honesty and candor and say, let's move on.
Yes, that is one way to look at it. But why go through years of litigation and pain? We've already hurt this family. Let's help them heal.
Are you proud of the way this hospital handled the situation?
You know, what I find appalling about this whole thing is that it's still being held out as an example and being unique. All we did was treat this patient's family the way we want to be treated, and we were honest and forthright.
You know, the hospital says that one of their lessons from this whole experience is that truth works.
Oh, absolutely. Truth can help other people who suffer a loss. But more importantly, it can wake up people's eyes in the medical profession to the possibility of errors to avoid these situations from happening in the first place.
Martin Memorial came clean about Ben's death, but knowing how their own system, which they thought was safe, ended up producing a deadly mistake, that was a piece of information other hospitals and doctors needed to know about fast.
We had information about a common procedure used throughout the world. So we knew that we had a key to making this safer.
There was a fix to the problem. It was cheap, it was simple, and it was something every hospital could do today. But would they?
Is it possible for a procedure to cause a death in, say, Florida, and the same procedure still being used months after the incident?
It is unfortunately possible.
When we come back, we're going to hear from this man who may have an answer to that question. Are other hospitals doing the same thing that mistake killed young Ben Kolb? John Hockenberry will answer that. Will have his question. Stay with us. Before we move on and continue with the lesson from Ben, I want to let you know a few stories that you'll see coming up soon in this broadcast. Coming soon, a story about Ricky Rodriguez, a young man who was with the Children of God. You will see that horrific videotape, and you'll see a horrific videotape as he tries to commit suicide, and you'll hear more from the Children of God. Also, two ethnicities, one black, one white. A neighbor argument that would end in racism and involve them moving out. Then, also, a story about one man who escaped prison and changed his name. But what happened next would stun everyone. One journalist who found out his real name decides what will she decide? Will she print the story or not print the story? The Fugitive. Plus this man works for the mob by beating the odds. Chris Hansen has the interview with one person who was beating the odds.
And next, are other hospitals using the same operating room setup that killed young Ben Cole? How hard is it to sound the alarm?
It is a piecemeal system, at best.
Could your family be at risk from the same deadly mistake? When A Lesson from Ben continues.
Stay with us. Also coming up soon in the broadcast, another story. The power of persuasion. Some people just seem to have it. They're able to use what they have to get what they want. Are we born with it? Or can we learn it? You'll see an experiment of what happened when Dateline took its hidden cameras to learn about the power of persuasion. The friendly persuasion, I should add. Now the conclusion to our story. When officials at Warren Memorial Hospital admitted their fatal error of what happened to young Ben Cole back in 1995, could that same mistake happen to other hospitals besides in that case? And remember, it was just one case. So the question is, have other hospitals done the same thing that happened to young Ben Cole? Could your family be the next victim? Once again, John Hockenberry.
Did you go fishing with Daddy? Did you catch snapper? Good for you.
It's been 6 years now since the tragic death of Tim Kolb's little boy, Ben.
Do you have any pets at home?
Yeah.
What do you have?
A bird.
I stopped having a normal life the day my son died. I'll never have a normal life again. I try to, but it's never going to be normal.
Hey, Ben, let me see. Good job, Ben.
6 years, plenty of time for hospitals around the nation to learn the simple lessons that might have prevented Ben's death. To Ben's father, Tim, it was unthinkable that in the life or death environment of an operating room, identical-looking drugs could be handled so casually. He wouldn't do that in his own wood shop.
It was so easy for things to be switched around. Oh my gosh, when we work in our shop, we work with chemicals, pouring resin finishes on tabletops. The drums are labeled. The buckets that go into are labeled. Even the buckets we drain into are labeled. And this half of the solution is kept well over there, away from the other half of the solution that is equally marked as well.
And here, all that's at stake is you throw out a piece of wood if you get it wrong.
Yeah, I might lose $20 or something, you know.
And in an operating room, where life is at stake,
They had less set up than I did for pouring tables.
But what might seem simple to a woodworker is anything but in the complicated world of healthcare. Consider this shocking fact Dateline learned. There is no universal standard, no national requirement whatsoever telling hospitals how to prepare the medications in their operating rooms. Why?
That's because healthcare is like no other industry. If a fatal accident occurs at, say, an airline or a nuclear power plant, there's an immediate federal public investigation. Every company and supplier is required to open its books to inspectors. Any fix uncovered by the investigation is immediately adopted industry-wide as a matter of law. Don't comply, you're shut down. But when fatal accidents happen in hospitals, there are no federal investigations. There are no federal inspectors, no government databases to count the number of mistakes and types of errors. In fact, in most states, hospitals aren't even required by law to report their deadly errors at all.
It is a piecemeal system, at best.
Dr. Dennis O'Leary is president of the Joint Commission on Accrediting Healthcare Organizations, a private nonprofit created 50 years ago by leading medical groups to make hospitals in general, and operating rooms in particular, safer places.
Basically, there is no real equivalent in healthcare to the kind of mandatory instantaneous investigation and reporting system, say, in aviation.
There is no national system of that nature, and no efforts to disseminate lessons learned to organizations.
In the absence of any government agency, Dr. O'Leary's Joint Commission writes general performance standards, conducts hospital inspections, and issues accreditations. Without that seal of approval, a hospital can have a hard time keeping its doors open. And on a national level, the Joint Commission is about all there is. Not much, considering that medical mistakes appear to be the 8th leading cause of death in this country, according to this recent report from the Institute of Medicine. Anywhere from 44,000 to 98,000 people are killed in hospitals each year from medical mistakes, says the report. But in the 7 years since the Joint Commission's been collecting information on fatal medical mistakes, its database contains less than 1,500 cases.
So how can you set standards when, even by your own admission, you're receiving such a tiny slice of the data related to medical mistakes in healthcare?
The data that we do get, we believe, is reasonably representative of what's out there. We gather, unlike any other database I'm aware of, not simply the occurrence, but the underlying causes.
6 years ago, the Commission got the call in the Ben Kolb case. Martin Memorial Hospital immediately disclosed its fatal mistake and described the simple changes it made to prevent the mistake from happening again. So did the Commission actually prohibit hospitals from using that flawed system to prepare drugs in operating rooms?
Have you issued a statement saying, never do this in the operating room?
We have not issued such a statement.
Day 7 to day
The Commission did sponsor a conference where Donnie Haas and Dr. McLean spoke on medical safety, and they published an essay in their newsletter. But the medical industry's own watchdog has never issued a new safety standard based on the Ben Kolb case.
We do not write our standards at the level of procedures. This is the difference.
But that's where the errors occur.
No, I beg to differ with you. This is the difference between swatting mosquitoes and draining the swamp. In organizations, if there is not an orientation to identifying, analyzing, and fixing problems, then we are going to have a big problem.
I think that's terrific,
well,
but how much analysis do you need to write 2 lines which would have saved Ben Kolb down in Florida? How much analysis do you need for that?
No, I understand that, but then the next patient will die from another detail, and the next patient... And
so fix that one.
But you're swatting mosquitoes. The issue here...
Is that what the FAA would say about a cracked bolt? We're swatting mosquitoes?
No, but I think the FAA and the advice that's come out of the airline safety reporting systems have been much more systems-oriented.
So what kind of systems-oriented changes does the Joint Commission make? Take the case of concentrated potassium chloride, a life-saving drug that's fatal if injected without first being diluted. Every year, hospital patients are killed because the drug is accidentally injected in its concentrated form. Medical experts say there's an excruciatingly simple solution to this deadly and entirely preventable problem. Put the drug in the hospital pharmacy, away from the patient floor, so it can't be accidentally given without first being diluted. Knowing about the problem and the solution, this is what the Joint Commission sent out to hospitals.
You say, we suggest that healthcare organizations not make concentrated potassium chloride available unless specific safeguards are in place. That's not mandatory, that's more of a suggestion.
That's correct.
Doesn't that sound a little weak to you, given the lethality of potassium chloride?
But it recognizes the reality, and there are hospitals, actually a number of small hospitals, that do not maintain their pharmacies open 24 hours a day.
Now again, I'm not a doctor, and I don't want to hammer this aviation analogy beyond its usefulness here. But if there was a case of a fatality caused by something that was immediately understood, cracked bolt in an airplane. If the FAA came out the next day and said, we've decided that we're going to encourage most airlines to replace this bolt, that person would be laughed off the face of the earth, don't you think? It would be either all or forget it.
These are not bolts, okay? This is a medication. The parallels between the aviation industry and healthcare are substantial, but they're not absolute.
Still, even the vaguely worded alert seems to have had an effect on deaths from potassium chloride, according to the Joint Commission's modest database. So why hasn't the Commission issued more, lots more alerts in other cases?
The Ben Cole case was widely publicized. It was widely known. It is so obvious the steps that need to be taken. It is like issuing advisories that you shouldn't play in traffic. I mean, it's that simple.
If it's that simple, that widely known, you might expect every hospital in America had learned the lesson from Ben Kolb's death and abandoned that flawed procedure.
But that hasn't happened. In fact, when we contacted some of the nation's best hospitals, they all told us they were using the very same setup Martin Memorial did, open cups and all. Still, there are about 5,000 hospitals in this country, and to find out just how widely this setup is being used, we talked to the organization that wrote the book on nursing safety in the operating room.
This is a commonly performed procedure that has inherent risks involved in it.
Ramona Connor is a surgical nursing specialist at the Association of Perioperative Nurses, the widely recognized authority for safe operating room practices. She fields calls about safety issues from nurses at hospitals around the country. And Connor says the risk of another fatal medication mix-up hasn't set off any alarm bells.
In operating rooms, as with airline flights, a small error can have a disastrous consequence.
The procedure that took Ben's life is not only commonly performed, says Nurse Connor, it's entirely unnecessary.
There's no need to pull the lidocaine from the container and pouring it into a secondary container. When that is done, there is an inherent risk of confusion occurring.
But even the well-respected AORN, which has published articles warning about medication errors in operating rooms, even they don't address the issue in their own official standards and practices.
I'm afraid I don't know why it hasn't made it into our recommended practices. I can't answer that.
For now, sounding the alarm is up to the Joint Commission, which says it's serious about medical safety.
Are you surprised to learn that the same procedure that Martin Memorial Hospital discovered in the Ben Kolb case is being used at other hospitals after the death of a little boy?
Well, I am surprised and concerned that the same setup is being used, and I think that makes a perfectly reasonable case that we should issue an advisory on that.
The Ben Kolb case was some years ago. I mean, this is not just occurring to you now that I'm talking to you, right?
No, but I have.
I mean, if that's the case, then I'm really concerned.
Well, that is new information to me, but is also information of great concern, and is more than sufficient to cause me to believe that we should issue an appropriate advisory.
And about 3 months after that interview, they did. But in 6 years since a little boy died, this is the most urgent message to come from the agency responsible for monitoring medical mistakes. Hospitals may choose, the message says, to evaluate the process for preparing medications for use in operating rooms. Not a bad idea, but if you were having surgery tomorrow, how would you feel, knowing this is as loud as the alarm ever gets?
If an airline crashed, we as a public would never stand for the airline not sharing the information they learned from that crash. It's public knowledge so that that crash can be avoided on some other airline or some other airplane. And in medicine, we don't do that.
The Joint Commission says that despite an alert it issued in 1998, reports of another type of medical mistake operating on the wrong part of a patient's body have more than tripled in the past 3 years. And like the mistake that killed Ben Kolb, these wrong site surgeries are all too preventable. There are steps patients can take to minimize the risk of a medical mistake.
And one of those steps is you need to start asking questions before the surgery ever happens. So if you're having surgery, what you need to do is start asking the question. Start asking these questions. Are these diluted? Or is this, is that, so and so? If you ask these questions, you probably could be safe. But if you watch this story, you'll know. Alright, now that we focused in on this, let's read your comments that you posted on this video. Mind you, I got a lot of comments on this broadcast. Like, I have audio issues, but this is about money. I'm on a budget. So this is the best setup I got. So let's look at your comments. This was from a year ago from the channel Sun. Very difficult to see the sadness of the father. Poor Ben. Rest with the angels. It's got about 6 likes. Motley, I love this channel too. Very professional, great stories. Thank you. Hope you subscribed. Kimberly Andrews. It's terrible that a hospital can be so callous with lives at stake. It's so sweet. It's tragic. Okay, Tina Bell. From 1 year ago. This was edited. My condolences to this family and their replaceable loss. 2007, diagnosed with appendix. Benner Esther Hospital in Phoenix, Arizona allowed me to be forgotten. And by the time they remembered me for surgery, right by appendix and burst perionitis, and that's it. And I spent 10 days in the ICU. It's a good story. Heather said, a very great documentary. Dateline was always a great documentary. Thank you. Really. But there is a correction I made. I put in the script was 2001. It was from 2002. I'll fix that mistake. Even though I uploaded about a year ago. I don't understand why such double handling needs to be occurred. Like that lady said in the end, it's not even necessary. Such a stupid mistake caused the loss of a young life. The poor parents. But kudos to the hospital being honest and transparent about it. That doesn't happen often. No, it doesn't. No operation is safe. I don't care how old you are and how healthy you are. I didn't watch the whole episode. Well, the family sued. They didn't sue. It was the truth. They're so ignorant. If I was that kid's father, that hospital would be called Ben's Memorial. Ben's name would be on every unit. Ben's emergency room. Ben's pharmacy. Ben's maternity ward, etc. Enemy of pain out the ass. Well, it's been over 20 years since this case happened, so I look forward to reading your stuff, and on the future shows we will look at your comments. Coming up next, if you saw a fight happen in the street, what would you do? Would you sit there and film or not? Or you're a bystander? Dennis Murphy with an experiment. Dennis Murphy with an experiment. Stay with us. Here's a question for you. If you saw a crime or a fight happening on a busy crowded street, what would you do? Would you sit there, watch? Would you sit there and film? Or just say, I've had enough of this, breaking it up? Not often. Tonight, as you participate in a test with Dateline Seeing cameras, you'll see what happened with a horrendous crime. Here's Dennis Murphy.
She hit this guy's car, just a bender. And he went to his truck and got a crowbar and started beating her car.
It happened to Dortha Word's daughter, Dalitha, at 2 in the morning on a weekend last August. She was headed home after a summer night spin through Belle Isle, Detroit's popular island park, when she sideswiped a car and didn't stop. Moments later, she got stuck in traffic coming across the bridge that connects Belle Isle with Detroit. The man whose car she hit caught up with her.
He started beating her and telling her, look what she did to his car.
The young man, a 6'4", 270-pound former high school football player, was in a rage. According to police accounts, he pulled Dalitha from her car, stripped her nearly naked, and began beating her savagely on this bridge. Dalitha, not 5 feet tall, escaped her attacker twice, and twice he caught her. She broke away once more and climbed over the side of the bridge, clinging to the railing for her life. But when her attacker came at her again, this time swinging a car jack, Dalitha let go, falling 30 feet into the Detroit River.
She couldn't swim, no.
2 men drove up after Dalitha jumped and dove into the water to try to save her. She disappeared under the swift current. Her body was found the next morning. And what grieves and angers Dorotha Word, even as much as her daughter's death, is that dozens of people stood by and watched as the attack went on for 25 minutes, and no one tried to help, or even to call police, until Dalitha was in the river. Some of the bystanders had cell phones, and there was a police station just at the end of the bridge.
The reason we know, Miss Word, what happened on that bridge, because there were people there watching, weren't there?
Yes.
People saw every bit of it.
Yes.
Cars were stopped, people got out of their cars?
Yes. I can't believe it.
It's something I have to live with for the rest of my life.
Harvey Mayberry was one of the dozens of bystanders that terrible night on the Belle Isle Bridge.
What was going on?
Your body slammed into the concrete, he choked her, he hit her. You name it, he just practically did it.
Mayberry and the others watched as the attacker held Dalitha out to the crowd and asked if any of them wanted a piece of her.
Did you feel like you were watching a movie, maybe?
How?
That crowd would become notorious nationwide as the bystanders, the incomprehensible bystanders who watched and did nothing as a young woman suffered a horrific death.
How could you just stand by, idly by, and watch somebody beat somebody like this and beat them, and you don't do anything? You don't even try to stop them. I mean, 35 or 40 people's gonna rush him. They didn't even try to do that.
I would never forget that night. I mean, and I'm always wondering, what if I'd have done this, if I'd have done that?
But he did nothing. And neither did bystanders in a frightening litany of recent incidents. In Washington, D.C., 4 construction workers watched as a woman was mugged. In Los Angeles, 30 bus passengers just sat in their seats as their driver was beaten senseless. And in Virginia, 6 people stood by as a store clerk was badly beaten and left bleeding in a corner. No one even called police. When you hear tragic stories like Dalitha Word's and countless others like it, you might ask yourself, how could those people be so inhuman? And you might say to yourself, well, if I'd been there, surely I would have stepped in and done something. But would you? University researchers have been asking exactly that question now for decades, and what they found out about bystanders, like those people on the bridge, could cause you to disregard forever that old adage, there's safety in numbers.
There's trouble in numbers. People tend to freeze each other and cause each other not to respond.
Princeton psychology professor John Darley was inspired to run a series of experiments on bystanders by something that happened nearly 30 years ago. Another notorious case of inaction. The murder of a young New York woman, Kitty Genovese. Genovese screamed for help repeatedly during the 35-minute stabbing, but no help came, even though more than 36 neighbors heard her cries from their apartments. The public was horrified, but Professor Darley says they shouldn't have been surprised.
We see these incidents on television, John, and we say we're not that spineless person.
You're exactly right. That's what we say. We mustn't keep coming to that conclusion. We have to think about the uncomfortable fact, the uncomfortable truth, that I might not help.
Darley says there is something else, something more than fear of getting hurt or involved that governs our responses. There's inaction in numbers. The more people who hear or see someone in trouble, the less likely that any individual will help.
The person who crumbles to the sidewalk with a heart attack, are they better off having one person there or 3 or 4 people seeing them?
I'm afraid they're better off having one person there, because if one person is there, that one person knows if this person is going to get help, it has to come from me. This is all pretty standard.
To demonstrate his findings that people react differently in groups than alone, Dr. Darley and his colleague Jeff Stone put some students to the bystander test. They were brought into a video lab room under the guise of watching a tape and commenting on it. They'd be paid $10 for evaluating the tape.
So that's sort of how this whole thing's set up.
As the students arrived, they were walked past a man posing as a maintenance worker. 5 minutes into the videotape, the students would hear what seemed to be the man falling from his ladder and moaning, out of view around the corner. Our hidden cameras watch to see how they'd respond. At first, there's just one test subject behind our one-way mirror.
I heard this sort of cry or a groan, and I decided it was definitely something that needed to be investigated.
Very common single-person reaction.
Single person reaction. Nobody else. I gotta move.
Another student, another crash. The student has to evaluate what he's hearing and decide to help or not.
Notice the poker face. Isn't that marvelous? He's helping me. He turned off the tape so he can go back and start the tape where it was while he's helping.
What made you decide to act, to intervene?
The fact that I was the only one there, I had to do something.
Again and again in his research, Darley found that the overwhelming majority of people, when alone, help.
He didn't answer when I asked him if he was okay, so I ran out. And at that point, I was really scared. I thought about what I'd do, and I thought I'd scream 911.
But adding passive bystanders to the mix drastically altered the results. Watch what happens when Dr. Darley plants two people in the room, people who've been instructed not to react when they hear the crash.
I thought, man, no matter how many people are in here, somebody's got to get up and go and check.
The two men instructed not to react are on the left and right of the picture. So what happens to the man in the middle? As instructed, the Confederates look up, then go back to watching the videotape. The subject glances around, then goes back to his work, as the moans continue for 14 seconds.
Emmanuel, did your brain tell you, here's a guy in trouble?
Yes.
You didn't get up.
No, I didn't get up.
Why didn't you intervene, do you think?
Because of the two people on my side. They did not react at all. So I figured they must know something that I don't know.
The group dynamic kicked in. Even though there was no danger if a person answered the call for help, time after time the subject sat frozen when flanked by others who did not react.
To go against the group is to say, all of you are wrong and I am right. And that's a hard thing for people to do.
Watch his reaction. He seems to look to the others to help him evaluate what's going on. He doesn't budge.
Now I know that I would be one of those people who you watch disgustedly on the news and say, why didn't they do anything? Thinking about it afterward kind of makes you feel like a sheep. You just feel like you're controlled by what other people do, and you don't really have too much control over what you think or what you do.
And that, according to Darley, is exactly what happens in most cases. People take their cues from those around them to decide how to act. If they're surrounded by poker faces, they are more likely not to respond.
What makes some of us heroes and some of us sheep?
More than we would like to think coincidence, I'm afraid. If many other people are not acting, if my confusion, my puzzlement overwhelm me, then I'm less likely to act. Within me, there's the hero. Within me, there's the non-responding bystander.
Also at play is a natural response psychologists call diffusion of responsibility. We tell ourselves that someone else will probably help, will probably handle it better than we would. And not the least of it is the fear of making a fool of ourselves.
We're stepping on stage not knowing our lines. We may embarrass ourselves, and we are intruding in a situation in which we may embarrass the people we intrude in.
Are you okay?
Dr. Darley says people alone help 80% of the time, but people in groups only 20% of the time. Which means only about 1 in 5 of us would react as David Brown did, as he breaks the force field of the strangers around him.
Whoa! The crash. The two Confederates notice. You can't help but notice. He hears it, looks, and it's almost as if he's looking at a wall. And he was clearly coping with, they're not acting. They're telling me there's no trouble here, and dealing with that.
Sometimes what everybody else is doing is not necessarily the right thing, so you have to just kind of ignore it and do whatever you think is right.
Good advice, but a highly unusual reaction. Dead opposite of what most of us do when we're just another face in the crowd. So what should we do if we get in trouble?
if we find ourselves the victim, if we are the person on the sidewalk with a heart attack, and we see the people out there who might help, but their faces are just frozen like pottery, what do we do?
Let's make clear that there's no ambiguity about what's happening. I'm saying I'm the victim. I really need help. Everybody, I really need help. And you, Mr. You, I'm looking you in the eyes. Will you please do whatever?
Pick a face out of the crowd?
Pick a face out of the crowd. That person knows the responsibility rests with him, with her.
Dr. Darley says that just one person stepping forward in a crowd can transform the group from passive to active.
The thing that haunts us, I suspect, is that might have happened on the Detroit Bridge.
It is a question that haunts Harvey Mayberry every day.
For the rest of my life, I'm going to deal with that. Yep, I had done this, then maybe she's still here.
But it took one person to step forward still, and nobody did.
And nobody did. But I honestly believe if one person had stepped forward, I know I would have. But to be the first one, no.
We can all find ourselves on that bridge, and we could all find ourselves not responding. But if we understand why that might be so, we are more likely to be free to respond.
Just yesterday, a jury in Detroit brought back a guilty verdict for the man charged with killing Delitha Ward. 20-year-old Martell Welch Jr. could be sentenced to life in prison.
Okay. Okay, common sense alert. Being passive basically means you're not interacting, you're staying put saying, I don't want to get involved in this. Being active means you're sitting there looking and saying, oh my God, somebody's being attacked. I better go do something. What's going on? Don't worry, I'll call the police. Hello, police. Someone's having a heart attack. I need you over here right now. This is the location, blah, 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 blah. And the police will come over here, saw what happened, this and this, so and so. That's at the moment that you need to call 911 instead of sitting on your ass, standing on your ass, taking out your phone, videotaping it, sharing with everyone on social media, thinking you're going to get tons and tons and tons of views. That's a no-brainer. It's up to you to make sure you know what you're doing. You need to make sure, because if that was your friend in a fight, I'll tell you something, if your friend was in a fight, it'd be up to you to not cheer on and say, yeah, Timmy, go get him! Get him, Timmy! Get him! Kick his ass, man! That's not the way to do it. Step in, break up the fight, drag him away. If he comes back, if you got a weapon on, you got your taser on, he comes back at him. Get it ready, switch it on, bzz, like that. That way he'll learn. Once you call the police and he decides to run, you chase after that sucker, you pin him down till the police comes. You say to him he started the fight, and the friend cannot run away. He needs to stay put, because he was the victim. He was a victim. You're the bystander. Bystanders eventually break up fights, but half the time everyone gets out their phone, films it, and posts on social media for everyone to see. So we see all these videos about people fighting because they think, oh, it's so cool to film. But let me tell you, I got hit by a bottle, and I got hit in the ankle with a bottle. 2 people came at me, called the police, called 911, and within luck, they helped out. But I don't know if they were there. So let me tell you something. The next time you see a fight happening or a brutal crime happening on the street, stop and ask yourself this question. Don't just ask yourself this question. Step in and break up a fight, or if there's a murder happening, you need to step in and call the police. You walk by as you see murder, you need to call the police immediately. Don't walk away. It's a bad thing to do. We'll be right back. Finally, I don't have nothing new for this final break, so I got 29 monkeys in 38 seconds. That's how you know if you're acting like a monkey. Like one of my fingers is like the monkey slammed down on the table. It's like, I want my food. Alright, before we leave you here, we have 2 bullying stories. Which ours we did at the beginning, but we were focusing on unappreciated teachers. So here's the first one. The first story comes 16 hours ago in Denver when a mom alleges racism in school district. Take a look.
Now, a mother from Castle Rock alleges that her kids are the targets of racist bullying in school, and not enough is being done about it.
Let's get right to Fox 31's Kristen Chapman with more on her claims and how the district is responding this morning. Kristen?
Actually, at this point, Mom Lacey Gansey says she wants to change district policy. She's even hired an attorney to help make this happen. So here's what she says is going on. Gansey alleges that ever since 2018, her kids have been the victims of bullying and even racist behavior. Most recently, her 14-year-old Jeremiah, who attends Castle Rock Middle School, says he endures racist language on a daily basis. Jeremiah writing a letter to school officials explaining the problem, even speaking in front of the Douglas County School District during a meeting. Here's what his mom shared with us.
Like the victim in these cases is the one that's punished because there's no advocacy for a right or wrong on this policy. It's just, it's crazy to me.
We spoke with Castle Rock Police, who says they are investigating an incident at the school. We also spoke with the Douglas County School District, who sent us this statement reading, quote, "It is our goal to take care of each and every one of our students in our district. We appreciate the Gansey family bringing their concerns to us so we can make sure our system is addressing their needs." In the meantime, Gansey says her kids will not attend school in this district in the future. Reporting live from Castle Rock, I'm Kristen Chapman, Fox 31.
All right, Kristen, a story that we'll, of course, track and see how that moves forward. Thanks.
And we'll also track that story. Now, our final one. This was in Florida. This father demanded action after the daughter was being bullied. It's something that we hear about every day. And it's one of my goals throughout the show is to help people, is to stop bullying and speak up. So let's take a look at this, and then we're going to wrap it all up.
A South Florida father is demanding action after he says his daughter was repeatedly bullied and the school isn't doing enough to stop it.
He reached out to CBS News Miami for help, claiming the harassment has gone from bad to worse.
My daughter has been being bullied. It has not progressed to being groped.
As CBS News Miami's Yvonne Taylor reports, the family felt like the only option they had left was to pull their 8-year-old out of school.
He pulled the girl out of class today. This father is alleging that the bullying has escalated to getting some scissors and cutting the girl's hair. This is the school where everything allegedly happened, and the reason why this dad is demanding action. It started 2.5 weeks ago. On a Wednesday is when he started bullying her, pushing her around, calling her name. George Niebla is an irate father. He's saying what happened to his 8-year-old daughter this last Monday is what set him off. And now she's had over 12 inches of her hair cut off by the same student. He shared with us pictures of the girl, one from the front and another one of her profile. According to Niebla, it has been a systematic abuse that presumably went from bad to worse. It progressed to him seeking her and pushing her up against walls and touching her and... Touching her as in her body? Yeah, touching her breast, attempting to touch other parts of her body, pulling her hair. That is when Niebla alleges he had the first meeting with the kid's mother and the school's administration here. Lincoln Marti is a private school with students in grades K-12. It is located on the 288 block of Southwest and 152nd Avenue in Homestead. What is the school telling you? Absolutely nothing. I went to Lincoln Marti to ask for a response to this father's allegations. The school told me they would be sending me a statement in a few hours. And this is what they sent. Lincoln Marti is prohibited from commenting on disciplinary matters involving its students. We take allegations of harassment and bullying quite seriously. The school will conduct an investigation, listen to all the parties involved, and take appropriate action. This Thursday, Niebla filed a report with the police. He says he fears the worst. Niebla said that after meeting with the school administration and the police today, he decided to pull his daughter out of school. He wants Lincoln Marti to carry what he claims they once promised him, which is to expel the student. In Homestead, I'm Ivan Taylor, CBS News, Miami.
Now there's the common sense. There's the straw that breaks the camel's back. Have the student expelled. Yes. Throw him in jail. Throw him in juvie. Let the system take its place. There's common sense. And schools saying, well, we take this quite seriously. No. You need to start taking this very, very seriously. I hear statements. I hear people saying, I'm sorry. Sorry is a little too late. My mom, if I apologize about, I always apologize about my mom. When I say I'm sorry, she always tells me, well, you should have thought about that before you went ahead and did this. That's what she always says. It's like the old saying, sorry is a little too late. So there's that common sense perspective. Come up with Throwback Thursday. We're looking more into these dirty dinings. This time from sit-down restaurants like Chili's, Applebee's. How did your favorite restaurant do? Lee Thompson with more. And also on Friday, come up on Friday, a story about Tourette syndrome. That's going to be great for this Wednesday to go on a Thursday. We'll see you again for Throwback Thursday on the GMB YouTube channel. Good night.